On 19th of January, we have done the part 1 session. Today, we have the privilege to have with us Professor Ashish Gupta, HOD, Department of English, Tripura University. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable time. Now over to you.
Thank you, Ajay, for introducing me. Uh, Today, what I'm going to present is basically the Art of Research Writing Part 2. My colleague Partho Sharuthi Gupta, Dr. Partho Sharuthi Gupta, has already spoken about the Art of Research Writing Part 1. So, probably mine will be a sort of an addition to what he has already spoken. And keeping in mind that this is a very pluralistic audience, which consists of people from different backgrounds, I have tried to keep the entire presentation as simple as possible. I have not only tried to keep the presentation technical in the terms of the way of writing as we do it in English literature teaching, but I've also seen to it that it also includes certain nuances which are important from the point of view of the notion of art. This very title, The Art of Research Writing, is very interesting. Research writing, as it appears to be, as it is believed to be, itself is something which is supposed to be something very non artistic. But the title says that it is an art, the way or the art of writing a proper research paper. So, keeping that in mind, I have tried to present a couple of slides in which I am speaking about how can we do justice to this notion of research writing as an art form. So I start with my first slide, which is basically something which dates back to or goes back to an understanding of why do we need to have research writing in higher academics. Now, instead of starting right from the technicality of research writing, I have gone back to an understanding of how do we understand this entire hierarchy of academic research? And I'm presenting to you a pyramidal structure. If you look at the pyramidal structure of academia, you will find that the base is broader and the tip is sharp. So if you look at my slide, you will find that I have tried to present a sort of a structure which tells you about how we go for an upward mobility towards a super specialized field, which relates to the degree of PhD and say postdoc and above. But we start from a very general, multiple subject oriented school syllabus. Now, if you look at this entire diagram, you will find that as we move upwards, we try to, generally go on shedding our extra flaps. We shed those subjects which are, number one, not interesting to us, number two, does not suit our acumen as academics, number three, does not have a purport to our way of organizing our research orientation, and we end up into a very super specialized field. If you look at this arrow, the green arrow on the left hand side of your diagram in my slide, you will find that it moves upwards, and as we move upwards, the entire pyramid tapers down to a very super specialized field, which is PhD and above. Before that comes your post graduation, before that comes your graduation, your class 12, and before that comes your class 10, the base of the pyramid. Now, why do I present this structure? I have presented this structure in order to tell you that as you move to a field which is super specialized, as in the case of doctoral research or a postdoctoral research, your credibility as a researcher depends to a large extent on the way in which you present your data. And the presentation of your data can happen at two levels. Number one, it could be a presentation which is verbal, as you do when you're presenting, as I'm presenting today, or it could be through your written presentation in the form of a research paper. And when you are going to a research paper writing, just try to understand, comprehend the tremendous amount of pressure on you as a researcher, which would trigger you to write something which is only and only logically substantiated, which is rational, which is based on solid background reasoning. So hence I present to you a pyramidal structure of academia in order to try, stress on the point that when you come to the stage of research writing, you are so super specialized in your field that your credibility depends upon how you present your data in the proper format. And hence comes this know-how or the technicality of research writing. Why research writing? The notion of research writing is something which probably emerged towards the end of the 17th century, might be, and flourished in the 21st century. A century in which we are speaking about, cross disciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, decompartmentalization, etc., etc. Now, this becomes necessary because at this point of time, a person like me who belongs to the corpus of English literature teaching cannot any longer claim that I will write something which is only subjectively true to me. Today, even when we are into linguistic research or into literary research, we have to keep in mind the notion of objectivity, the notion of cross verifiability, the notion of rationality and logic, because we are into a playing field in which interdisciplinarity and decompartmentalization are the most important determiners. Now, what do I mean by objectivity? Objectivity is no subjectivity, which means when I'm objective, I'm trying to look at something from a perspective which I share with everybody else. Now, this perspective which I share with everybody else might be very personal to me, but at the same time, it is also available to all the others with whom I share this perspective. That is objectivity. And how do I substantiate objectivity? I do it through cross verifiability. What is cross verifiability? That if I conduct a research and come to a particular conclusion about that research, that particular conclusion is not only valid to me alone. Rather, if that particular conclusion which I have arrived at is to be arrived at by other people also who are in a similar field like I am, provided that there are certain conditions which are kept intact, they will also be able to arrive at the same conclusion. This also negates subjectivity. In your sciences, you have things like, because I remember in my class 12 I read something like room temperature, room pressure, etc., etc., as a prerequisite for conducting an experiment. Now, in our field also, though it appears that literature is very subjective, we try to introduce today in this 21st century a notion of cross verifiability, where I can say that if I have arrived at a particular conclusion after reading Shakespeare's plays, then you, as a separate researcher, can also arrive at the same conclusion provided certain conditions are kept intact, and that is cross verifiability. What is rationality and logic? As I said, in research writing, there cannot be any loose end. There cannot be any expression of personal emotion. There cannot be any personal prejudice and bias. Whatever you state in research writing has to be rational, has to be logically substantiated. Rationality and logic are the two faculties which are governed by the brain. Emotion and sentiment are the faculties which are governed by the heart. So research writing is all about the brain. Research writing is not about the heart. Even if you are supposed to present something which is a conclusion that your heart has come to, arrive at, you have to present it from the point of view of rationality and logic. Now, next, let's come to interdisciplinarity. What is interdisciplinarity or decompartmentalization? Once upon a time, there was this idea that if I'm working in a particular super specialized field, my field is secluded, is immune from interferences from other fields which are adjacent to me, but there is always a boundary across which there cannot be any osmosis. Now, that notion has been ruled out. Today, we speak about interdisciplinarity or decompartmentalization, which says that, okay, if you're working in a particular branch of literature, remember, that particular branch of literature has also a lot to do with a larger matrix of knowledge which takes into account social sciences, history, sociology, economics, and might be even sciences. For example, I had the fortune of guiding a research which was based on vampirism. Now, when I took up this particular student as my PhD scholar, she had to explore not only vampirism from the social point of view, but also vampirism from the medical point of view. That is, from the notion of transfusion of blood. So, this is what I mean by interdisciplinarity. Impersonal mode of presentation. As I said, there cannot be any vent of personal emotions, feelings, sentiments when you are writing your research paper. Even if you are, keen on presenting something which is very personal to you, very subjective to you, remember the presentational mode should do justice to the rationality of that particular presentation. That is, if you are presenting something which is very personal to you, your presentation should not make it personal. It should be personal, objective, rationally verifiable. Next is the point of credibility. What do I mean by credibility? As I said, as you move upwards in this pyramidal structure of higher academia, you come to a point where what you say, what you write counts as a researcher. That is what your credibility as a researcher is. That is where the entire burden of becoming, true to your discipline, of being ethically true to your discipline, morally true to your discipline comes in. So that is credibility. Hence, whenever you write something in a research paper, you should know exactly what it means. You should know how you will be able to logically substantiate it, and that is credibility. Acceptability. When you do all these things, you become acceptable as a researcher. Otherwise, you're not accepted. Now, what is the basic premise of research writing? I have tried to keep this as simple as possible. The basic premise of research writing is triangulation: hypothesis, thesis, synthesis. What is hypothesis? You make a statement uh, after gathering or after collecting primary data. You make a statement. That statement is your hypothesis. Generally, it's your research question or your research statement. And then comes the notion of the task of substantiating logically that particular statement that you made as something which is true, which is real, which is valid, which is verifiable. And this is what you call as the thesis. So the entire body, the entire corpus of your research is your thesis. And then comes the last part. What is that? Synthesis. The conclusion or the culmination, where you say that I have made such a statement, I have provided enough proof to substantiate that statement, and therefore I can say that what I said in that statement is true. That is synthesis. Uh, Now, when you take up this triangulation of research, hypothesis, thesis, synthesis model, you also have to formulate the research question as a trigger. Depending upon the topic or the area or the field that you choose, you will have to formulate your research question or your research questions, which would actually trigger you through the entire course of writing, composing your thesis and your synthesis. You should also know that you have to proceed according to a layout, a particular design, a particular schema, and that is your research design. This is very important. Now, these 2 points have to be very clear to you when you are writing your research paper or research article. What is your research question? What is the focus that you are addressing? And what is the way in which you are trying to approach that particular field, your research design? It has to be very specific, very clear, not only to you, but also to your reader. Remember, when you are speaking about writing, there are 2 points that have to be taken into consideration: the writer, who provides the data and presents it in a particular manner, and the reader, who's supposed to read this data and understand this presentation, decode it, in order to gather that particular relevant information which the writer wants him to gather. So the research design comes in. And as a word of caution, every statement in research writing requires logical substantiation, clear logical reasoning, which exactly goes back to the preceding schema: hypothesis, thesis, synthesis. We also call it the deductive logic. Deductive logic. You deduce something, you come to a conclusion from the facts that are given to you, from the data that is given to you, from the empirical observations that you gather when you are doing an experiment. So, this is a deductive logical design. And every statement that you make in your research writing has to be logically substantiable, logically defined, logically defended. One very important ingredient of research writing is the style sheet, and we are familiar with a lot of different modes of style sheets that are available to us. We have the Modern Language Association of America style sheet known as the MLA. We have the American Psychological Association style sheet known as the APA. We have the Chicago Manual, and so many others. Now, what is a style sheet? A style sheet is a manual or a template detailing a writing or a documentational pattern or style. It prescribes to you a particular style in which you have to present your data, your information. It also spells out the specified layout of a document. You have a body of data available with you, you have a body of information available with you have a corpus of observation available with you. The style sheet tells you how to present it in a particular designated format. Why is it necessary? Because it provides uniformity across diverse modes of documentation or writing. So you'll find generally when you're subscribing or submitting to a journal, the journal will automatically prescribe a particular style sheet. Why? Because that makes the task of the journal editor easier. The journal editor can do this task of copy editing very easily, follow the style sheet which is specified by that particular journal. So the notion of uniformity comes in. It also prevents divergences and digressions. This is very important. You tend to move away. It might not happen so much in sciences or social sciences, but in literature, from the field to which I belong, we tend to digress because we find that so many things are important, so many things are significant. And then one particular, faculty that every researcher should be having is the faculty of trying to, you know, distinguish between what is relevant and what is not. This is a faculty which many times a researcher misses out. This is very important. This particular faculty is something, it's like a sixth sense. It tells you, okay, I have so many data available to me, I have so many informations available to me, but with reference to my particular topic of presentation, these data are important, others are not. So I can then chuck them out. For my paper, I'll stick to these data only, these informations only, these observations only. So this is like, removing the chaff from the grain, removing the unnecessary from the necessary. So this is something which a research writer should always have, should know what is relevant and what is not important, what is relevant and what is not. The style sheet also allows information to be structured as per a specific documentational pattern, structured information, so that the reader can easily gather what is being communicated to him. Because when you are writing a research paper, your basic premise is communication. Your basic premise is functional communication. You are communicating. So if you are communicating, then the person, the receiver on the other side of your message, has to be able to decode what you communicate very easily. Otherwise, your communication fails. So research writing has to be that sort of a writing which communicates across a particular structure, a certain structured information or data. I provided you a sort of a template which is based on Modern Language Association of America. This is a MLA template as an example, and we are subscribing to this template in Saraswat, that is the Tripura University Research Journal. Now, if you look at it, you'll find that the entire template speaks about a 1-inch margin from the left-hand side. It speaks about the title, which comes in caps, capitals, bold, and centralized. All fonts, Time New Roman. 12 size, double line spacing. And then on the right-hand side, you have the name of the author, the ORCID ID, if available, the unique ID of a researcher according to that ORCID ID. If you have that, you put it there. Affiliation with correspondence mail, your affiliation to the institute to which you belong, and your correspondence mail. This is followed by your abstract, which consists of 200 words, might be 150 to 200 words in general. And then you are supposed to write the keywords, which could be 10 to 15 keywords. After that comes the complete text of the paper, which is left aligned, not right aligned. And whenever you're starting a new paragraph, you go for a 1.5 inch indenting from the left hand side. Then comes the endnotes, which would always be given in the form of superscript in the body of the text. In MLS style sheet, the works cited page appears at the end of the paper and gives full details of every source that you have cited in the text. It's works cited in MLS style sheet. In other style sheet, it could be references, it could be bibliography, whatever. Like the rest of an MLA format paper, the works cited should be left aligned and double spaced with 1 inch margin. Very clear. And then I have given a couple of samples of how you are supposed to, document your references. If it's a book or a chapter of a book, the way in which you do it. If it is a journal, the way in which you do it. If it's a website, this is the way in which you do it. So you can very easily follow this style sheet if it is prescribed by a particular journal and if you're submitting to that journal as an example. It's very easy. It's not at all difficult. It's a very mechanical sort of a thing. There's nothing creative about it. It's a very mechanical procedure that you have to follow. Now, then I come to the research paper structure in general. And to begin with, I start with something which is very important, the title. What should the title tell you about a research paper? It should reflect the focus of the research paper in a precise and catchy manner. Now, this word catchy is something which is not very research oriented, but I have used this phrase or this word in order to give you a sort of an understanding about what I mean by an attractive title, a title which not only gives information but also asks the reader that, well, the title is telling you only a part of what is expected to be, read in the rest of the body of the paper. So a title is very important. And remember, the title has to be precise. It cannot be a paragraph. It's almost like, and I give an example, like caption writing in advertisement. What happens in a caption writing or a copywriting in advertisement? You write the exact word. You don't write anything else. You go for the exact word only. So the exactitude of word selection, vocabulary, the exactitude of word combination becomes very important for a researcher when he is framing his title, when he is, composing his title. And no superfluity. Don't say everything in your title. Reduce flab. As I said, no superfluity. The exact and the exact word only. Be precise. Remember, your title is not supposed to say everything. It's supposed to invite your reader to read more. And then comes the abstract. What is an abstract? This is only a nutshell of what your research paper is all about. It's a nutshell. It's a sort of a very, it's a sort of a synopsis, let us say. It's a sort of a short synopsis of what your research paper is all about. Therefore, strictly adhere to word limit. And generally, they are prescribed by the journal that you're subscribing to, you're submitting. 100 or 150 words, at the most 200 words. Again, keep in mind, do not say everything. Abstract will not say everything. Abstract will not explain the theoretical paradigms. Abstract might only make general statements and refer to a theory. But the case study, the application part of the theory, the praxis of that particular theoretical application will come in the paper, not in the abstract. And to give an example for you to understand, abstract is something which happens to be, analogous to the poster of a thriller. Now, the poster of a thriller, the curtain raiser of a thriller, a movie for that reason, the trailer of a thriller will not give you the entire thriller. Your research paper is like a thriller. Retain the suspense till the end. Your abstract, your title, should not spell out what is there in the paper. It can only give a hint. Then comes this section which we call keywords. Many journals ask for this. What are the keywords? Pick up the words that in your paper serve as the determiners for carrying forward your line of thought, your progression of thought and ideas. There are certain words, very important words in the body of your text of your research paper, which are the determiners which tell the reader about your line of thought, your course of argument, your progression of idea. Pick up those words only. And again, know how to remove the chaff from the grain. Don't pick up words which are not keywords. Look at the word keywords. Those words which serve like a key, a password sort of a thing for a reader to understand what your research paper is all about. Keywords should be chosen such that glossing through them would facilitate a construction of the line of thought of the researcher. Very important. If a person looks at the keywords, he would be able to guess what this research paper is all about. And then comes introduction. This is where you state your hypothesis. You state the background to your topic. And remember, when I speak about research paper writing, I speak about research. It might be in any field for that reason, but it should have an impact on human society and civilization. A sort of a welfare notion of research. I'm guided by that welfare notion of research. Hence, I say the background of your topic, your introduction, your statement of your hypothesis should trace the evolution or origin of that particular topic or field of study that you have chosen, and obviously its larger social or human relevance. This is very important for me because I believe a researcher is not an isolated individual. He's a human being first and foremost, and therefore he has his roots in the society, and therefore what he does in his research should matter to the society. So, the larger social and human relevance of your topic, its relevance and place in the history of human civilization and thought. Every research that is being conducted is nothing but a part of a greater tradition of, knowledge, hermeneutics, corpus of understanding, of which this is an integral part. So, your introduction should also speak about how your topic is relevant to and is placed in the history of human civilization and thought. In the progression of human civilization and thought, how you place your research topic. It should also speak about its significance and scope across the matrix of the respective discipline. So, your discipline, for example, if I speak about English literature or literature written in English, when I speak about a particular text written by a Northeastern writer in English, I should also be able to tell in my introduction where does it stand in this entire matrix of literature in this world written in English. And I should be able to network and connect with the larger matrix of my discipline. Beware, and I have a warning out here, there is absolutely no place for your personal reasons, reflections that are not substantiated by objectivity and logic. Your guiding words, your guiding principles are two in number: objectivity and logic. Whatever is not objective, whatever is not logical, has no place in research paper writing. Next comes literature survey or literature review of existing literature. Now, this is also important because it's an extension from your introduction. It should provide for a history of the corpus of existing scholarship in this particular field that you have chosen. It should document a lineage of intellectual progression in the chosen field. As I said in the previous slide, your research is a part of a larger tradition of research in your discipline. So, how or where do you place yourself, and what are the other scholarships available in your area preceding you? You should also be able to place the contribution of the current research paper in perspective as a part of a larger tradition of knowledge. Very important. You cannot be isolated as a research paper writer, as a researcher. Where do you place yourself? How do you figure yourself in the entire structure of human knowledge, hermeneutics? Okay, that is very important. So, what does a literature survey do? It tells you about what has been conducted in this particular field before you were there as a researcher, and tells you precisely where those questions which have not been answered satisfactorily can be a trigger to your research. Now comes the body of your research, the thesis of your research paper. Lay down your points as per the style sheet chosen. So you have chosen a style sheet or is being prescribed to you, and you write, lay down your points according to the style sheet that you have chosen. Every point that you make, every line that you write in a research paper should have a solid logical backup and grounding. Yes, that's very important. No loose statement, no general statement, no generalized remark. Every line, every statement, every word that you use have to have a solid logical backup and a solid structural grounding in your discipline. You should be able to stand by it as a researcher. Remember that the onus is on you to prove what you write is right. It's your responsibility to prove that what you write, WRIT, is RIGHT, what you write, correct? Illustrations and diagrammatic representations in research paper is very important. This is what I feel, because in this era of visuality and visual culture, an image or picture communicates more effectively than words. Obviously, think about cartoons or comic strips. You have so many different languages in which cartoons or comic strips are written. Take, for example, the Tintin comic strips. So many different languages. The first comic strip written on Tintin was written by Urge, illustrated by Urge in Belgium. But when we read Tintin in Bengali or in English or in Hindi, do we remember that it was written in Belgium? We don't, because language there does not become important. What is important is the untranslatable illustration, the iconography. So when you see stars and heavenly bodies on the top of the head of a character, say for example Captain Haddock in a speech bubble, you know that Captain Haddock is being hit with something and is going all airy wiry. Now this is something which a Bengali would understand, African would understand, even Portuguese would understand. So an image is cross-cultural, is trans-cultural. So when you're presenting your research paper, if you could make effective use of images and pictures and tables, that would be an added advantage, because they communicate better than words. Explain using illustrations and images, since language is culture specific, as I told you, but iconography, images are cross-cultural to a large extent. Okay, image is cross-cultural, it's universal. Language is culture specific. And in this reference, just think about comics and cartoons and how they reach out to a larger audience, which might be separated by divisions of language. And then comes formatting. Arrange your arguments in gradual steps. Again, no loose ends. Provide referencing as per style sheet followed. If you're following a particular style sheet, do the referencing as you're following that particular style sheet, prescribed by the style sheet. Research writing demands academic sincerity, the fact that all credible info is copyrighted. If you are presenting a credible information, remember all credible information is copyrighted. So as a research paper writer, as a researcher, you have to have academic sincerity. You cannot use a copyrighted material without proper acknowledgement. That would lead to plagiarism. And I'm coming to what is plagiarism and anti-plagiarism in research writing in my next slide. And hence, acknowledgement of sources is a must, and must with caps and bold. It's a must. You cannot avoid that. Research ethics. This is very important. This follows from what I have said earlier. Anti-plagiarism checks. You have so many softwares right now, Authenticate, Urkund, etc. You can just place your research paper, upload it, and get the report. And every research journal will tell you the limit up to which they would allow similarity in the Urkund report or the Authenticate report. It could be 7%, it could be 10%, and they would say we would accept plagiarism which is unintentional within, say, a limit of 10% only. This is mandatory for research writing, because that provides you your confidence that what you have written has been checked and has been found to be true within limits. So this is very important as a confidence building measure, CBM, for a research writer. So anti-plagiarism check is a must. What does it facilitate? It facilitates avoidance of plagiarism, intentional or unwanted, unwarranted, and builds a database of info with established rules. After a plagiarism check, whatever you present has an established root in logic. It has a root tracing its origin. So therefore, whatever you present becomes credible, and you as a researcher, you have earned your credibility. Conclusion. Now, generally, what happens is whenever someone speaks about research writing, they would end up with a conclusion. What is conclusion? Culmination to a logical synthesis. Remember, a hypothesis, thesis, synthesis, triangulation. So, in conclusion, you culminate to a logical synthesis that validates the thesis. Whatever you have substantiated, logically argued in your thesis, culminates into your conclusion as a synthesis. You say, hence, what I have opined, what I have guessed, what I have provided as a hypothesis proves to be true. So, hypothesis, thesis, synthesis in the conclusion. It sums up the observations and inferences that have been drawn. It often provides for a future projection, roadmap of the research to be conducted in the field in the years to come. Your conclusion does not end up with you as a researcher. As I said, your introduction does not end up with you as a researcher. It traces you as a researcher with a tradition which dates back before you. Your conclusion traces you as a researcher with a projection in future. It tells the prospective researcher, the one who's going to read your research paper, as to what could be his line of progression, his line of thought from where you have stopped. So it is like a relay race. You hand over the torch to the next torch runner, and it goes on. Knowledge continues that way. And the next slide is about write, WRITE, writing, write, correct, RIGHT. Remember, it's very easy to write difficult, very easy to confuse people. It's very difficult to write easy. Try it out. It's so easy to write very confusing stuff so that neither you understand nor anybody understands. And it's so difficult to communicate difficult propositions in simple language. When I mean language, I don't mean English only. A research writer could be writing in any language, but these general rules have to be followed in whatever language you write. Please do not write to confuse, because when you are writing to confuse, you are creating a meta language. You know what is a meta language? A false language which is born out of a language use. So a meta language is a language which is required to understand another language. So don't write in a meta language. Avoid a complex and circumlocutive style of writing. Don't try to write very complicated, and don't try to go round and round and round and round, beating around the bush. Avoid that style of writing. This is something which I would frankly tell you is more true to literature researchers. I don't think it's true for science researchers or social science researchers. We try to, prove that we are great writers and we know a lot. Now that is a fault that has to be avoided in research writing. Please be precise. Please be straight. Please be functional. Please be communicable. Write to communicate and not to confuse. Notes and references, that comes at the end. Use superscript to provide for footnotes and endnotes according to necessity of the style sheet that you've chosen. Footnote would come at the end of every page. Endnote would come at the end of the entire research paper. And you have to give a superscript that's there in your MS Word. Extensive referencing to avoid copyright infringement and to facilitate proper documentation. Go for extensive referencing. Don't leave out anything without referencing, because that would avoid copyright infringement, knowingly, unknowingly. Be strict about it. Take it as a commandment. Go for extensive referencing in your research writing. Follow the format prescribed by the style sheet adopted. And for all these things, please follow the format that your style sheet has adopted, has given to you, prescribed to you. And I come to this unending end. Now, why do I call this an unending end? Because most of the time, research writing would stop at conclusion, notes and references. That's it. But I don't stop here. Conventionally, all research paper writing manual end in reference. After that, there's nothing more for research writing to be spoken about. But for me, the most important part comes here. What is the most important part? For me, copy editing is a must for good research paper writing. You should know the craft of copy editing. You should know how to edit your copy, read your proof, and do corrections on that. and hence the researcher should know how to edit the proof of the research paper. It happens most of the time. Many journals would send back your paper saying, please go for a grammar check, please go for a typographical check, please go for a spelling check. And then what happens? You don't know where to look for. You should be capable of copy editing. You should be able to copy edit your own paper. Know where, because of a foresight or a negligence, you have committed a grammatical mistake, a spelling mistake, or a punctuation mistake. And copy editing is a skill which has to be honed and learned. So we could take up this session some other day. So there is absolutely no compromise on issues of grammar and spelling in whichever language you are writing. Every language has a grammar inbuilt into it. Every language has spellings which are right and spellings which are wrong. You cannot take the language for a ride. It could be Hindi, it could be Bengali, it could be Swahili, it could be English. But whatever language you choose to write your research paper, remember, there is no compromise on grammar, punctuation, spelling, and syntax, the sentence structure. Ensure grammatical accuracy, spelling accuracy, systematic progression of thought, and therefore happy writing. This is what all research paper writing is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your informative session. I hope everyone get a clear view on this topic after this session. So I did not find any of questions in the chat box. So we are conclude here.
Thank you.
So thank you, sir, once again, and thank you,
Yeah, it
my
was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
IIC team members, for organize this type of webinar. I hope everyone enjoy it. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.